There is a specific kind of loneliness that nobody talks about. Not the kind that comes from being alone, the kind that finds you in a full room. You're surrounded by people who know your name, who laugh at your jokes, who would call you a friend, and you are watching it all from behind something, present in body, somewhere else entirely in mind. You smile at the right moments, you nod when the room nods, but underneath all of it, something inside you is very, very still. Most people, when this happens, assume something is wrong with them. They decide they're too introverted, too damaged, too much in their own head. What almost nobody considers, what Jung spent his entire career trying to say, is that this disconnection isn't a malfunction, it's a signal. And what it's signaling will change how you understand every relationship in your life. By the time most people reach their late 20s, they've spent years carefully selecting which version of themselves is safe to show. In professional environments, competence, no doubt. In friendships, entertaining, agreeable, whichever version gets the warmest reception. In relationships, enough vulnerability to create closeness, never enough to feel truly exposed. Jung called this the persona, the mask the psyche builds for the social world. And here's what almost no one understands about it. The mask is not a lie, it's a survival tool. Every civilized human being has one, every single one. The problem isn't the mask. The problem is when you forget there's a face underneath it. There is a specific kind of person, and you may recognize this, who has spent so long constructing a reliable social identity that when they finally sit alone in a quiet room, they don't quite know what they actually think, not deeply. They have opinions borrowed from environments that rewarded them, preferences shaped by whatever made them acceptable, a personality that functions excellently in company and feels strangely hollow in solitude. They don't know what their own interior sounds like anymore because they haven't listened to it in years. In 2014, researchers at the University of Virginia ran a study. They asked participants to sit alone in a room for 15 minutes with nothing, no phone, no book, just themselves and their thoughts. A significant portion described the experience as unbearable. Some, given the option, chose to give themselves mild electric shocks rather than sit in silence with their own mind. They chose pain over stillness, over themselves. That is not a quirk of modern distraction. That is a portrait of how far a person can travel from their own interior life. And when solitude becomes something to escape from, you are not just avoiding boredom, you are avoiding an encounter with whatever is living in the parts of yourself you've never stopped to examine. Jung called that territory the shadow. Not evil, not darkness in the way films suggest, but unintegrated. All the emotions that were too complicated to process in real time. The anger you swallowed in environments where anger wasn't allowed. The grief you didn't have space to feel during a period that required you to keep functioning. The version of yourself that wanted things you decided weren't allowed to want. None of that disappears. It moves. It relocates underneath the persona and begins to shape your behavior from there, in ways you don't consciously author. The person who says they never get jealous, but quietly destroys relationships the moment they start to feel real. The person who insists they're fine while becoming inch by inch unreachable. The person who can feel the glass wall between themselves and other people, but cannot explain where it came from or how to dissolve it. This is what unmet interior material does. It doesn't stay quiet. It finds other ways out. And here is where the disconnection begins to make sense as something other than a mood problem. When you carry a significant amount of unprocessed interior life, grief, shame, unresolved identity, rage with nowhere to go, and you enter social spaces, you are bringing two realities into contact with one another, the reality you present and the reality underneath it. What often happens is not connection, it's collision. Someone says something ordinary across the table about their weekend, their opinion on something that doesn't matter, and something inside you recoils, not at them, at the gap. The distance between the conversation being offered and the depth of interior experience that isn't being touched. And after enough of those collisions, the psyche begins to protect itself. You stop initiating genuine openings, not dramatically, not consciously, but the quality of your engagement subtly shifts. You stay in 5 topics you know are safe. You stop asking questions that might take a conversation somewhere real. You curate what you offer. And over time, the curation becomes the whole relationship. From the outside, people might sense you've become harder to reach, more self-contained, present in the room, but somehow less available. Not cold exactly, just behind something.
There was a woman who spent 8 years in a marriage that looked from the outside like a genuinely good one, stable, affectionate, two people who were, by every external measure, compatible.
And then one evening, sitting across from her husband at dinner, she had a thought, not angry, not dramatic, just quiet and clear, that she had never once said anything real to him, that everything she had ever shared had been carefully processed before it left her mouth, that she had no idea what he would do with the unfiltered version of her. And she realized, at the same moment, that she had done this deliberately, that early in the relationship she had read what this man could hold, and she had calibrated herself accordingly. Enough to feel intimacy, not enough to feel exposed. She had built a relationship that was safe, and the safety had slowly become a glass wall. She could see him, he could see something he believed was her, but nothing was actually passing between them. That is not a story about a bad marriage. It is a story about what the unexamined self does to relationships over time. It limits them to the depth of whatever version of yourself you have decided is presentable. And most people, without malice, without awareness, live inside that limitation their entire lives. Jung called the path out its individuation. The word sounds clinical, the experience is anything but. It is the process by which a person gradually, uncomfortably, becomes fully themselves. Not a better social performer, not someone with fewer edges, but the full version, the one that contains contradictions, the one that holds grief alongside ambition, tenderness alongside anger, certainty in some things and profound uncertainty in others. The process doesn't begin with clarity, it begins with dissolution. The old identity starts to crack. Relationships built on the old identity feel wrong. Social roles that once fit begin to change. There is a period that feels, and often is, like falling apart. And most people, standing at that edge, turn back. They reinvest in the familiar persona. They choose the known disconnection over the unknown disintegration. Because disintegration is terrifying, even when it is the beginning of something. Here is what changes when a person actually begins the interior work. Not as a concept, as a practice. The first thing they notice is that their social interactions shift. Not into some effortless warmth, but into something more honest. When you're no longer working to suppress a significant portion of your own interior experience, you become, paradoxically, more available to other people. Not because you've become more open in the performing sense, but because the energy that was going into management is now free. You're no longer performing being fine. Which means when you say you are fine, there's a chance you actually are. And when you're not, when something is genuinely difficult, there is greater capacity to say so without the whole performance collapsing. Because you are no longer a performance, you are a person who has met themselves honestly, which creates a kind of solidity that doesn't need constant maintenance. People can feel this, not always in words, but they feel it. When the person across from them is actually there, when there is coherence between the surface and whatever lives underneath, when the eyes behind the expression match the expression, that is when real contact becomes possible. But there's something necessary to say about the people who will not make this journey with you. When you begin to change, when the persona softens, when your presence shifts, not everyone will welcome it. Some will feel, without knowing why, quietly threatened. Because when one person stops maintaining the social fiction, it puts gentle pressure on everyone around them to examine their own. And many people are not ready for that. They built their relationship with you on the understanding that you would stay the same. Your evolution disturbs a contract they didn't know they'd signed. You'll notice it in small ways. Conversations redirected toward lighter territory the moment something real surfaces. A subtle discomfort when you are too honest, too present, too undisguised. This is not a judgment of those people, but it is something to understand clearly. The relationships that cannot survive you becoming more genuinely yourself were always, in some sense, relationships with the mask, not with you. Losing them is real grief, and also a kind of release. There is no permanent arrival at the end of this. The disconnection will not resolve into some luminous, uninterrupted state of human connection. You will not complete the interior work and emerge into a life where all conversations are real and the glass is gone forever. What changes is something more quiet and more durable. the quality of your own company, the degree to which you can be in a room, with others or entirely alone, without the low-grade anxiety of constant self-management, and the moments, more frequent over time, when something genuine passes between you and another person. Not cinematic, not dramatic, just a conversation where you say something you've never said before, and the person across from you goes quiet for a moment, genuinely quiet, and then says, "Yes, that's it exactly." And in that moment, the glass is gone, not forever, but fully for now. That is what Jung was pointing at, not a theory, not a framework, but something uncomplicatedly human. The experience of being genuinely met, which is only possible after you have genuinely met yourself. The disconnection you feel, if you recognize any part of what has been said here, is not a diagnosis. It's a direction toward the interior material that has been waiting, toward the face underneath the mask you forgot you were wearing, toward the person you actually are underneath all the careful management. That person has been there the whole time, quiet, patient, real. They're not waiting for you to become something new. They're waiting for you to stop pretending to be something you're not.